Susan Robach? Susan Robach?
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Rohrbach, and I am a resident of Main Street in Centerville. I would like to read a letter from a resident of Craigville who is not able to be here today. There seems to have been a lot of discussion and a lot more about other areas other than Craigville. This is from the Reverend Joanne Hartunian. I am a resident of Craigville, and I live at 84 Ocean Avenue, Centerville. For 26 consecutive years, I have been the spiritual leader and pastor for family camp held annually at the Craigville Conference Center, Centerville. I support the Red Lily Pond project, and I encourage the Cape Cod Commission to implement the DCPC to protect the Red Lily Pond and other waterways, ponds, the river, and the beach, for which the Cape is so well known. Should our natural resources become further contaminated and compromised, not only will the quality of life for all Cape residents, fish, and wildlife become marginalized, but we will become an economically depressed area when tourism ceases because of the lack of clean waters. Despite misleading and frightening claims made to me by a so-called well-meaning petitioner at my doorstep, I researched his claims and allegations against the DCPC, which I know to be false. Among other things, he said that to support the DCPC would mean that if my house burned down, I would not be able to rebuild. And upon reading the DCPC document, I learned that this was not true. I support the DCPC and look to you for your favorable and strong support. Thank you, Reverend Joanne Hartunian. And I would like to add also on my own behalf, I am a former counselor for the precinct in Barnstable in which this all occurs, and a former planning board member. I'm sorry that the two counselors who succeeded me have been forced to recuse themselves and are not in the room tonight. Because I know something about zoning, I think that if someone had come to me with a petition, I would have understood what was true and what wasn't true. But I think a lot of people wouldn't. I don't understand people saying that they think that this is wonderful and it's terrific and the regulations are great, but they don't want them to apply to them now.
1 minute, please.
I live in a historic area. I live in a historic house on Main Street in Centerville. I voted for the Cape Cod Commission Act even though it affects what I can do with my house. I feel like I live in a very special place that lots of people enjoy, and I have a responsibility to my neighborhood, to my community, just as what happens in my neighborhood affects other people and all those wonderful people who come riding and walking down the street during the summer and other times of the years. So what happens in the Craigville Beach area affects me. I think that to me, it protects property values. Predictability, environmental protection, and safety in coastal areas is a good thing. But more than that, I think there's a higher standard here of responsibility to neighborhood, community, and visitors because we live in a special place to preserve it, and I hope that you will formalize that standard by passing these along. Thank you.
Thank you. George Gingold.
Thank you very much, Commissioners, for having me here today. I'm George Gingold. I live on Elliott Road in Centerville, about a good baseball's throw from the edge of the district, and 4 of our neighbors and all of our neighborhood recreational facilities are within this district. This is now the 3rd time I have come before the DCPC, before the Commission, to urge moving forward with the DCPC, and I am hopeful it will be the last as we fully support the DCPC. And by the way, I'm also a member of the Board of Directors of the Red Lily Pond, and so I totally support Steve Brown's comments on water quality, because that's a lot of what this is all about. What unites all of us here at the Cape is our geography. We are bound together by our geography, more or less what comes east of the bridge. Now, what is our geography? It's not the industrial rust belt of the Midwest. It's not the rolling farms of Kansas. It's the environment. The environment is the name of the game of our geography. And the environment drives our economy. And if we didn't have an economy, and it's in hard enough shape as things are, we would begin to drift away and be gone by the time the oceans wash over the Cape some thousands of years from now. So please remember that it's not just enough to be in favor of the economy. It's to be in favor of the environment. It's very important to be in favor of the economy. And then finally, I would add that while several of our friends at Long Beach have referred to their stewardship of the beach area, which my wife and I discovered about the same time Councilor Lugo discovered it in 1973.
1 minute, George?
Yes, please.
Okay.
That'll be fine. And but while I do not deny that our friends have been good stewards, many of us who do not live on Long Beach or even live in the district and who walk that beach year-round through snow and ice, because you walk through the snow when you get to the beach and it's wonderful. We, too, are stewards of the property in the 8 months that the vast majority of the Long Beach residents are not there. So this is a town-wide resource. It needs to be looked at from the benefit of all of us in the entire town, and I support wholeheartedly moving forward with the DCPC implementing regulations as proposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ann Gingle?
Well, I live with my husband on Elliott Road, and what he didn't have a chance to say, we were introduced to a problem on Long Beach about 5 years ago when the president of the Long Beach Association was trying to take away our public ways to the water. They're right here. These are public roads, and Long Beach is a public road. And we are good stewards in the environment, and people who go there really appreciate the birds, the terns. It's been a place where nobody has to put up a barrier because everybody cooperates and watches the birds and watches the dogs, and it's a lovely environment. What was happening was that the president of the Long Beach Association was trying to put up a walkway and snow fences so that the public beaches for the residents of Barnstable were totally eliminated. And my husband and I learned about this and went down to the beach and took pictures of the snow and the high water mark and the low water mark, and we could see the seaweed, and showed why this was being eliminated, and the erosion that they claimed was there was not. And we showed that too. And the Centerville Civic Association helped us, and we got that stopped. And we've watched all these meetings and everything with the 5 lawyers coming in the last minute. Join us on Long Beach, because we join you. We protect your property year-round. We keep our eyes open. We have washing machines removed from the road, things that get dumped there, and join the Civic Association. We need you. So much has been going on, and we really need your protection. The one thing that bothered me, too, was that okay, Fred Chirigotis, our counsel, was recused, but how come these people got a
1 minute,
client
Ann.
into his wife's
1 minute.
law firm? Yes, thank you. Shouldn't that client have been, a conflict right there so that Fred could serve? There's a lot going on underneath. And also, the last thing I want to say is there's 2 houses on the end of Long Beach Road, right here. The additions are not on your map. They got hardship exemptions. One said it was because he wanted to give the house to the children and his wife wanted privacy. That's the last house. And they're double the size. Come down to Long Beach and take a look. These things aren't helping anybody's real estate value, and our Centerville River polluted is not helping anybody. We need you very badly because we weren't able to accomplish it on our own. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Barbara Birdsey.
Hi. Most of my comments are in writing, so if I can pass them down.
Yes, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
I'm Barbara Birdsey. I have a home, 177 Long Beach Road. I've lived there all my life, all 39 years. And I just have a few comments. One in reference to these are all in reference to Long Beach solely. The reference to the view shed, I think, has been brought up, that there really isn't much of a view shed walking down Long Beach Road, except at the very end, you can see the beach a little bit. Likewise, from the beach looking up, you only see the houses. There really isn't much of a view behind that. The real issue, I think, as far as view goes, is the Cape Wind project. And if people are concerned about losing their view, they had better consider what will happen. And I have put a copy on the back of each one of your letters, what it will look like if Cape Wind is built. There's your view. 130 structures, many, many lights at night. Enough said. Just a clarification, I'm a little confused, having read the documents about the V-zone. I believe that Long Beach is in the V-zone. I'm not sure what the implications are for that. If I read it correctly, that means that if we're considered part of the V-zone, there is no, automatically there is no expansion allowed under this new regulation. If a picture's worth 1,000 words, maybe you could help me.
1 minute, please.
I worked on the renourishment project, the original one, for 3 years, following my mother and several other dedicated people. This is what the beach looked like. This is a lot of rocks. This is the rack line for high tide. So you can see that at high tide, people couldn't walk on the beach at all. In fact, if somebody was walking by on the beach, they walked on top of this wall. So if I was having dinner, I could look out and see people walking by very easily. If it was a storm tide, they couldn't walk on the beach in that part of the beach.
Get a wrap, please.
Yep, this is what it looks like. Just after the first renourishment project, you can see there's a very large beach. This is before the plantings even began to take effect, and obviously it has provided a huge resource for the town and the residents for the beaches and the wildlife, et cetera. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Didn't know I could talk so fast.
Norm Vester.
Good evening. I stand here before you a two-time loser. I'm both a grandfather and I'm a summer resident. So I hope you'll take that in mind when I just say my remarks, which will be few. My wife's family bought our cottage in Cape Cod in Craigville Village in 1939. By the way, Steve, none of us ever drank that water. We're taxpayers. We're happy to be here. The staff did a nice job. They didn't point out any differences, so next time you might do that, but it really was a nice presentation. Local zoning, I think, is plenty in this case. Unintended consequences rear their heads when anything passes on from a local group to another group, no matter how well-intentioned everybody is. And usually people are well-intentioned. But I ask you that this be defeated, please. And finally, I was raised that one did not give up rights, no matter what they were. One sold them, or one deeded them to those that came after them. And that's probably the last thought that I want to leave you with. Don't ever give up your rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael J. Prinsey.
Good evening. My name is Michael Prinsey. I'm an attorney with Win & Win Hyannis. Of the 39 years that Barbara's been around, 35 of those I've been practicing law in Cape Cod. And going back 35 years, I've represented Lori LaBelle, Snowden, and Douglas LaBelle on various matters in the town of Barnstable and many other towns. Today I come before you representing Lori Snowden LaBelle based upon her ownership of property on Centerville River. She is one of the people, along with her husband, who signed the petition requesting and urging you to let the DCPC lapse. I would point out to you, while I'm not an historian on the Cape Cod Commission, this has to be the most unusual DCPC you've ever seen. For the most part, you get broad-based support among the town selectmen or whatever the town governing board is. For the most part, you get broad-based or at least equal-based support of the people within the district. And for the most part, you're looking at districts that have a lot of open space, area that hasn't been developed. In this particular case, you're looking at 300-plus lots, all of which have been developed. Strikes you, and it strikes me, that over the past 10 to 20 years, the town could have and should have perhaps implemented zoning regulations, Board of Health regulations, to deal with what they perceived 20 years ago was an issue. Now, in addition to that, I point out to you that they let the first DCPC lapse, bringing on the second DCPC and a whole series of other issues that stemmed from that. I want to highlight one particular inequity that I've asked to be redressed at the local boards. I've appeared in many times and before the town of Barnstable for Ms. LaBelle. She got a permit to build with the Conservation Commission. She filed an order of condition. The first DCPC was filed. She couldn't do anything. The order of conditions lapsed. I went before the boards when the first DCPC was being talked about. I said, put in a grandfather provision for those people that already have approval.
1 minute, please.
I said to the growth manager, thank you, that, how many people are impacted if you implement some grandfather provision for those people who already have a permit? I never got an answer. I think it's probably 2, maybe 3. Joanne may have that information. I sent to the board through Christy Senatori a requested grandfathering for anybody that has already got a conservation approval, which, for the benefit of today, she still has potentially in effect. And I would ask you, if you are going to implement it, please endorse a grandfather provision for those people who are already permitted when the first DCP got started. Thank you.
Thank you. Judith Galtrow.
Judith Gautreau, 103 Long Beach Road. I've been here over 31 years. You've heard a great deal today about this renourishment that we did. It was here. And the reason for it was that they built Dows's Jetty, which interrupted the natural flow of sand west to east along this area. So there's nothing for it. It's going to happen again, and we're going to have to nourish again. What no one has mentioned is that in doing this, when people have talked about our stewardship, and I cannot support them enough. We are wonderful stewards of that beach. But they have not mentioned that at our last permit was given to us by the Conservation Commission, and they would only allow us to do this if we planted beach grass, and a lot of beach grass, from our walls down towards the ocean. Beach grass proliferates, so it's all nice and thick, and indeed, it did its job. It has held the sand. Much better in the second nourishment than in the first, because a lot of the sand from the first nourishment, again, it moves from the west to the east, is now down here on Craigville Beach. And good, it's a wonderful beach. When you have beach grass, you are not allowed to walk on it, you are not allowed to sit on it, you can't put a blanket on it, you can't go through it. It is protected. It's there for a reason. I have a 100-foot wide property, and I have 50 feet of beach grass. I have lost 5,000 square feet, the use of 5,000 square feet of my property. My children grew up on that beach. They played games, they made forts, they played horseshoes, whatever. My grandchildren can't even step on it. You're not allowed to.
1 minute.
When they told us that this condition was going to be implemented, we had the opportunity to back off and not do these projects. Because if we did, my situation is the same as everybody else's on the beach. They were going to lose the use of this wonderful beach. We didn't back off. We did it anyway. And the next time it's needed, we'll do it again. We have given, and we have given, and we have given. This was a sacrifice, but it was the right thing to do. And we'll do it again. Please don't also take our property rights away.
Thank you. Is it Lee Williams?
Lee Williams at 26 Prospect Street Ave in the village of Craigville. Although I agree with the general philosophy that generated the DCPC, I am against it in its present form, and I do support local zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Last speaker, Sarah Alger.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Alger. I'm an attorney with an office in Osterville. Was born in Hyannis and grew up doing my own fair share of flirting on Craigville Beach, although I have to admit it was largely ineffectual on my part. I have two basic points to make. The first is that I'm concerned about judicial review under the implementing regulations that you have before you. I don't see reviewing them where a property owner would have any right of appeal under the document as currently drafted. Under the current situation with the zoning bylaw in place, if there's an issue, you get to appeal to the Zoning Board of Appeals if the building inspector issues a decision that you don't agree with. If you then don't agree with what the zoning board says, then you have an appeal right to either the land court or the superior court. I don't see that, and maybe I'm misreading it. Second, though, and most importantly, in my view, this DCPC is a nuclear option. It's a drastic measure. But the issues that I've heard us all discussing here today are really local issues, and I think they can be dealt with locally with Zoning Board of Appeals changes, Board of Health measures, and Conservation Commission regulations. One of the things that was said earlier, I think by Mr. Neswicki, was that if we did this by zoning, that people would run in and file approval required plans and get dimensional freezes on their property. But I think if you look at the map, the way this district is broken up into such small lots, the ability to do that sort of freeze is significantly limited, and I think is probably not anything we need to worry about. As you know, the town council failed to obtain the necessary vote to enact this DCPC. But I think you've heard today, at least from Councilor Crocker, and I think we saw at the hearings that we went to, and I went to a lot of meetings because I was involved on behalf of my clients from the beginning, from 2008 to now, that there is support amongst the council members, at least the ones who voted in opposition to the DCPC, to support zoning and other measures to address these issues locally. Since that's the case, I went back and I noted that a few years ago, this very commission allowed the Pond Village DCPC to lapse.
1 minute.
And instead, thank you, and instead allowed the town council to enact zoning changes to address the issues that were of concern to that particular district. I would urge you to do the same thing here, to let this DCPC lapse and to allow the Barnstable Town Council to adopt zoning and other measures to address these issues in a local manner. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank all for their comments, and at this time, are there any additional staff comments that would like to be made?
Yes, thank you. Again, Patty Daly. I just want to address some of the comments that were made during the hearing. First of all, several speakers noted that they wanted locally developed regulations. Well, the implementing regulations in front of you are locally developed. Essentially, we took what the town had crafted, which was a negotiation with the many property owners in the district, and for the most part have forwarded them to you as written with some additions, but primarily as written, so they are locally adopted. Secondly, sticking with the zoning regulations, you have a very detailed letter from A.M. Wilson raising some questions about definitions and whatnot. Primarily, those definitions are existing in the town's ordinance, or if they're not, they have been well vetted by the town's professional staff through growth management and the town attorney who are here. And could address that if you had any further questions about that. But I'm satisfied that the town will be able to enforce those regulations if they're adopted as presented. One statement that was made at least once, if not twice, was that under these proposed regulations, if you lose your home, you wouldn't be able to rebuild. That is completely false. If you lose your home, you may rebuild it. So I just want to make that clear. A couple of speakers talked about kind of preserving the area as it is, and I want you to understand as well that while the zoning is potentially more restrictive with respect to height and bulk than the existing zoning, it does not freeze the place in time. It does allow an amount of additional expansion for every single property, for the most part, in the district. So there is expansion potential generally in the district under these regulations. There was a comment that homes or properties that intersect the V zone can't expand. That's not exactly true. You can't expand in the V zone, which is a velocity zone, and probably not a wise place to be expanding structures in the, anyway. There was a comment regarding the fact that regulation will result in erosion of value. I don't believe that's necessarily true, and I'd point out that properties in the Old Kings Highway Historic District, although this isn't exactly the same, but those properties have enjoyed very good value, and there are people who want to live in those areas that contain those protections. Let's see. I think that is about it. I was going to address the process issue. There were a couple comments made about, a single hearing in the middle of the winter. But I think Peter Fisher was able to address that with you. There have been lots of hearings held and lots of opportunities to participate. And then finally, there have been a couple of comments about appeals and judicial review. I know that the town of Barnstable has a townwide DCPC right now. I am not aware that DCPC has prevented the usual appeals from going forward, but again, the Barnstable Town Attorney is here if you all have more detailed questions about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add a few closing remarks here. First, I want to thank everybody for their testimony and their civility today. When I look in the audience, I see Dom Gautreaux and the Gingolds and Jack Driscoll and Meg Loughran and Pete and Shirley Fisher and Jim Lane, Steve Brown. I know these people. I've worked with these people before. They're all good people, regardless of which side of the issue they were on. I want to thank the town councilors for showing up and voicing their support too, and including Councilor Jim Crocker, who is, I want to state for the record, I mean, sometimes councilors can get snarky with one another. I think that's part of the job description. But Jim Crocker is a man that I respect much and have a great deal of admiration and personal affection for. We don't happen to agree on this issue. Having said that, it's time to close here and open up for questions. But so often on the local level now, we look for leadership on issues, and these are difficult decisions and difficult choices. But we if we strive for unanimity, we're not going to make progress in what I think we all want to do here, which is to keep a special place special. We've also heard some uncertainty as to what it would mean if local zoning passed as it is. I mean, the local zoning as drafted eliminates all nonconformities and makes all conforming properties, in a way, exterminating all your grandfathered rights. So either that's not true or that's going to be challenged, that there's a degree of uncertainty there. What the adoption of the implementing regs will do today will make sure that the language that's been proposed applies equally to everyone on the date of adoption. And so we won't have any of the fears of the uncertainty. And I don't believe it's a fact or in my heart that there is a lot to lose here. I understand the concerns whenever somebody's trying to overlay restrictions on your property. But just to close with one interesting fact, because a lot of this discussion today surrounded sort of local representation. We want that local input and that direct representation. I want to reiterate that the day-to-day administration of these implementing regs are going to be done at the town level. That's where the interaction happens, not at the commission. The only time the commission would see these regs is if there's a change in the future, to make sure that the changes are consistent with the original designation of the DCPC, which when we did it the first time in front of the Assembly of Delegates, they remarked was the best DCPC they had saw because of the process associated with it. But an interesting fact, given the town government in the town of Barnstable, they have a city form of government with an appointed manager, 13 town councilors, none of whom serve at large. So as a Barnstable town resident, when you go for your direct representation to vote, you're voting for 7%. That's what you get when you go to vote. That's your one counselor, 7% representation in front of the local boards, your local town counselor. And you can go in and try to talk to the manager too. If that suits you, he's appointed by the town council. Conversely, on the county level, and this ordinance doesn't stop here today, it goes to the Assembly of Delegates. On the county level, you have one representative to the Cape Cod Commission who is appointed, much like your manager is appointed. And you have, because of the weighted vote with the Assembly of Delegates, 22% representation. You have more representation on the county level than you have on the local level. That may shock some of you, but that's a fact. So I don't feel that we're removing this from the process, that we're taking it away from you, that you don't have access to elected representatives who certainly can change these regulations going forward. We share the same goal, which is to keep a special place special. Many people whose properties are going to be subject to this are understandably nervous about that. But I think if we continue to work together, we can keep this special place special. I think the way to do that is to move forward with adopting these implementing regulations today. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing in the record. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? So moved. At this point, it is open for the members of the Cape Cod Commission to discuss the Craigville Beach District of Critical Planning Concern and implementing regulations. And should you have questions for staff, this would be a good time to ask them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The appeal process is the question that came up and Paul just mentioned. So could I have some sort of the representation? I think it was Barnstable. You said the Barnstable counselor was here, or whose counsel was that going to be able to address the appeal process? I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay? The appeal process came up several times, both by people speaking in the audience and by staff. So what is the appeal process once this is implemented for some of these properties?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Just for the record, my name is Ruth Weil. I'm the Barnstable Town Attorney. I was actually flabbergasted when I heard these questions raised about the appeal process, because we had, at a minimum, 4 lawyers working on this, and not one raised any issues about the appeal process, because I think it was clear to all of us that the 40A, which is the zoning act, the statewide zoning act appeals process applied. As was alluded to by Ms. Daly, we have a townwide DCPC for a rate of development for building permit issuance. We've had since 2001, and it's all gone through the local process, appeal process through 40A, the zoning act. So no question was raised before today. I can assure everybody in this room that that's the appeal process we intend to implement.
Thank you for the clarity. And just one quick statement, if I may, Mr. Chairman. In today's world, we would not see the national seashore on Cape Cod because of the climate of the world is changing, and I think one of the things that's important is protection for the future, not only of property, as which was saying, but also of the environment and the resources around that environment. So I think there are changes that have to be made at times, and this may be the beginning of one of those processes. Thank you.
I'm curious, Mr. Chairman, why we've had 2 different legal opinions, one from town council and one from someone representing the clients. Now, which one of them is right? I mean, I am not going to vote for something that removes somebody's rights. But if, on the other hand, I'm assured those rights are not being removed, then I'm going to vote the other way. But the question now is, who is right?
I would call upon staff.
How about outside counsel?
Yes. Either one.
The hearing is closed as the record.
Can't you ask a question, though, Mr. Chairman, of someone from the audience? That's a treatment committee under rules. He wrote the law. He wrote the law. Why don't you ask him?
Okay. In order, please.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Jessica Wilgus. I'm Commission Counsel. As it relates to rights of appeal and judicial process, there is always judicial process, whether it be through the channels of 40A Section 6, or whether it be to appeal a DCPC, a right which known as an act of certiorari in Superior Court. There's always appellate process, and appellate process exists here as well.
Another point of order, Counselor? Once the hearing in the record is closed.
Yes, sir.
Is it closed for discussion, or?
It's closed, but for point of information, if you wanted to call upon someone to speak, you could.
I would allow it for 2 minutes.
Yes, there's two questions. One is, does this impact the right of judicial review? Under Chapter 40A, You have a right to appeal a decision by the building inspector that you think's wrong to the Board of Appeals, and then if you're not satisfied with the Board of Appeals decision, you have a right to appeal to the Land Court of the Superior Court. This, although it is styled a zoning amendment, is not a zoning amendment. Indeed, the very point of doing it through the DCPC is to not have to follow the strictures of Chapter 48. So in my opinion, you do not have a right of appeal under Chapter 48, Section 21, from adverse decisions by the Board of Appeals or the Planning Board if they're the permit granting authority. Under the very terms of this, they incorporated some provisions of the Barnstable zoning ordinance, and they chose not to incorporate others. One of the ones they chose not to incorporate is the right to appeal from adverse decisions by the building inspector to the Board of Appeals. So that's my legal opinion on that. This does severely and adversely impact the right of judicial review. As to the question of grandfathering, the question of grandfathering is a question of what rights you have under Chapter 48, Section 6, as augmented perhaps by the local zoning ordinance. Again, this is not a zoning ordinance. And therefore, the rights you have under Chapter 48, Section 6 do no longer exist if this is enacted, although the implementing regulations may afford some protections for non-conforming rights, as indeed this one does, but those are rights which this august body can take away any time it pleases.
Thank you for your brevity, Mr. Neswicki.
Just to address Mr. Putnam's point, you're going to get dueling opinions, I would imagine, and you're going to have to make up your mind on that as it relates to the right of appeal. Although the right of appeal under the implementing regs may not be the same as 40A, they may difference in style, there's still a right of appeal. So the right of appeal exists. The particular format in 40A may not, but there is a right of appeal from any potentially adverse decision from this. As it relates to the grandfathering issue, I think what you heard sort of in the end of the Attorney Rickman's comments are to the point. It's not necessarily what the language is in front of you, it's the potential to remove it in the future that a lot of people are afraid of.
Thank you. Other members?
I would like to just make a comment. Number one, I've walked Long Beach, and I've driven down Long Beach to take a look at it, and I can't, with the exception of a couple of houses, and there's some people here in the audience that I think have been hurt by this whole process, those that probably did require and deserve maybe a hardship exemption have been stuck in the middle of this process, so I feel regrets over that. However, I'm not sure where else people can go from what I have seen developed in Long Beach, and I do applaud them for their stewardship of the beach, but all of that is part of their own protection of their properties as well, and that's something that wasn't stated. The one point I want to make, though, is that when we had a DCPC in place of this area before, I believe it was Attorney Weiner who did come and successfully argue a hardship exemption, which then allowed the building on of a particular property. Some people felt very strongly that that shouldn't have happened, but it passed. So there was a process there that did go through. And it wasn't as though there wasn't any appeal or that there wasn't work that was collaborative work from the commission. Am I right, Attorney Weiner, that you did get cooperation and assistance even in the style and upgrades of that home through the Cape Cod Commission? And
Absolutely.
yes.
The DCPC, however, was...
Please. Point of order.
I'm sorry, I addressed the gentleman, so I
Okay.
apologize for
All
that.
right.
I put him in that spot. So this is not as, there's words here in some of these documents that this is going to be a draconian ruling being put on, and yet in every case that I have ever sat on, there has been
much work done on part of the staff here, once it's been brought before people, to assist not only the property owner, but also to live by the law and to protect the environment, which I think everyone in this room agrees on, that we want to protect. So with that, I think that by saying these very extreme sentences that your property rights and your civil rights will be taken away are stretching truths that have already been exhibited not to be true, and that there isn't a process always in place for people within not only the Commonwealth, but right here in the Cape Cod Commission. So, but one this is sort of my editorial on this, but my question is, what right would be taken away if the grandfathering was eliminated? I mean, if all of these zoning, and everybody agrees that all of these implementations, everybody in this room sort of said, you know, we agree with these and we think it should be done by the local control, but we're afraid of grandfathering. I'm not sure what protections or what more would you want to do that you feel has not been referenced in these zoning laws. This is something I don't understand, because it seems like it covers a lot of different area here. Everyone seems to be accepting of that, and it's this feeling of grandfathered rights that we're afraid of losing, and yet there still is always an appeal process which has been exhibited through the town of Barnstable from 2001. You said that this has gone on. So what's going to be taken away that would never be able to be recovered?
I think we're beyond the time for asking questions of the public.
Yes, but all right. So is
I
apologize for the question. But
any more comments from the members? Yes.
I'm a newer member of the Cape Cod Commission, and I own property on a barrier reef, and I certainly want to applaud the 28 non-official and the 8 official statements that I heard at the public hearing. And I want to tell you that being a good steward, I mean, you're absolutely wonderful in doing that, and I'm not sure that it is enough, because of some of the folks that came before you were not as diligent as what you were. And when you do live in a barrier reef or on the Cape Cod, it is left up to the, I don't believe in tourists and residents. If you own the property, and you know, I don't think that anyone, I'll speak for myself, I look at you as being full-time owners and not part-time, you know, or take that lightly, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting in this room. But I think that one thing that stood out to me is that there was a lack of utilizing zoning in the past before I heard some very strong testimony. And I think it's from, you have to have it from the people that live. You can't just drive down the road. So I listened intently and took notes. And I think if you see a steady decline in your own environment, as I have on the property that I own on Sagamore Beach, is that when you see a steady decline in the environment, which affects the air, the water, the wildlife, the plovers that beaches, you know, beachgoers hate to, you know, they want to disturb them, is that, and shellfish, that it's compelling that for all of your excellent work, it may not be enough. And with that, you know, you want to be able to protect what you do own. And I think when we choose to come to Cape Cod, whether as a part-time owner on vacation and then perhaps eventually begin to live here, we do have to make some hard changes on the everyday way of life in order to ensure that that the overall property in which our single family or maybe two pieces of property, that we have to really look diligently and sacrifice some things of our own daily things in order to protect it for the man that said that he has his grandchildren, to ensure that that property is safe and it's not. I also had a house in Quincy where the beaches were so bad that in order to clean up Quincy Bay was after it even got worse, that you couldn't walk the beaches, swim the beaches, and spend a day. So you have a lovely river beach resort, and for 32 months of having go around on this, I think it is time to make a decision, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you and also applaud all of you for coming forward and doing the good work that you have where you live.
Thank you. Thank you. Jack.
Just a comment, Mr. Chairman. Once the district was established, the municipality that everyone thinks should come forward with regulations had 12 months available to them to implement regulations. And if necessary, they could have had a 90-day extension. And at that point, when they didn't, the commission was forced to adopt their own implementing regulations, which largely reflect what the town wanted to do in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we're ready for motions.
We have several. One motion is, I'll move to find that the Craigville Beach District of Critical Planning Concern implementing regulations as presented conform to the guidelines of the Craigville Beach District of Critical Planning Concern.
Sir.
We have a motion and a second. Comments from the Assembly? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? One opposed, is that correct? Abstentions? So moved. Next motion.
I further move to find that development is discouraged in barrier beach areas to mitigate future storm damage, and move to find that a sewer resource benefit assessment for the Long Beach area of concern shall be submitted for Cape Cod Commission approval consistent with condition WR3 of the Barnstable Wastewater Facilities Plan DRI, EIR 96005, and that any sewer system constructed in the barrier beach should contain a pump station cutoff.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Mr. Chairman, have we discussed this motion at all?
Discussion is commencing. First motion, there was a call for discussion for motion 1. Seeing none, we move to number 2, and now I'm calling for discussion now. Is there discussion?
Mr. Chairman, we have not, to my knowledge, dealt with the sewage problem here in either committee or in open session, so I'm curious as to why this motion arises at this moment.
Councilor?
Yes, thank you. The reason, I actually did cover this in my presentation on the environmental regulations, and this when I was talking about the barrier beach system and whether it's appropriate to put public infrastructure in the barrier beach. The reason it's come up as a separate motion is that it's not a regulation that the town would adopt, it's just a finding that the barrier beach is a sensitive environmental area, that if public infrastructure is to be built there, the town needs to demonstrate that there's an overriding public need to do that, consistent with a previous DRI decision.
Is the motion
through the chair, please?
Mr. Chairman, is the motion as proposed consistent with what we just heard? Would you read the motion again, please?
Yes, be happy to.
The motion was That we move to find that development is discouraged in barrier beach areas to mitigate future storm damage, and further move to find that a sewer resource benefit assessment for the Long Beach area of concern shall be submitted for Cape Cod Commission approval consistent with condition WR3 of the Barnstable Wastewater Facilities Plan, DRI, EIR 96005, and that any sewer system constructed in the barrier beach should contain a pump station cutoff.
Continued discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I don't think what we heard as a motion parallels what we heard from staff.
Mr. Chairman, with your
Yes.
permission, the language in the motion is exactly what is in the staff report. The way I've explained it is what's in the paragraph, essentially. The one thing I did not raise during the public hearing portion was this shut-off valve at the pump station, which is, I deemed it sort of a technicality, but the purpose of that is that if there were to be a sewer built there and the area were to become inundated in a storm, you want to ensure that the water's not backing up into the town system.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I understand the technical issue of the shut-off. The question I have really is, I look at a recommendation by staff, but I don't see it as something that is a motion that's in front of us. Now, the motion in front of us requires the town to assess betterments, to build a sewage system, to do a bunch of things. To my mind, that is not the issue we have here. The issue we have here is the DCPC. Let's vote the DCPC and be done with it.
Yes, yes, I agree that I am anxious to get there as well. However, we have a few more steps to take, and this is one of which I think it's been demonstrated is appropriate and inconsistent with the overall effort. We have two more motions to make.
Mr. Chairman, I think it might be useful to just clarify, this has nothing to do with betterments. This commission, back in 1996, when you reviewed the Barnstable Wastewater Facilities Plan, you adopted a condition that said, if you're going to sewer that area, you need to come back to us and provide some additional information, and that's what those words, needs assessment, are. It's something that this body has already adopted through a 96 DRI decision, and this motion would be to find that you've done that back in 96. I'm sorry if it was confusing.
With all effort put into that explanation, I would call for a vote. It's been moved and seconded. The discussion has been made. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions?
1, 2.
2 abstentions. So moved.
Now it gets more interesting. I move to approve the form and content of the Craigville Beach District of Critical Planning Concern implementing regulations as presented for proposal to the Assembly of Delegates if the town of Barnstable does not adopt implementing regulations for said DCPC in a timely manner.
It's been moved and seconded. We have discussion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
whenever I hear a timely manner, I'm not I don't quite understand what that means. Could you please explain what timely manner means as far as this goes?
I think staff, timely manner, please.
Yes, Jessica Wilgus, Staff Counsel. Where you're meeting today, and it's October 28th, it's prior to the expiration of the time period that the town of Barnstable has to adopt and incorporate implementing regulations. They have until November 5th, so this motion discusses that if they are not able to do it within their year time period, that you are approving the form and content of the regulations. There'll be another motion to address the specific dates and the action that you would take.
Thank you. Any more comments? Discussion? Call for a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? One abstention. Please.
Last one, Mr. Chairman. I move that if the town of Barnstable has not adopted and incorporated implementing regulations for the Craigville Beach District of Critical Planning Concern into its municipal development bylaws on or before November 5th, 2010, the executive director shall notify the Assembly of Delegates, and on behalf of the Cape Cod Commission shall forward to the Assembly the implementing regulations for the Craigville Beach DCPC as approved for proposal to the Assembly by the Cape Cod Commission at its meeting on October 28th, 2010.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there questions or discussion? A vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? It carries. That finishes the Craigville Beach voting. Is there any other business? We still have a meeting going on. Order, please. Other business? Any Cape Cod Commission member comments to be made at this point? Seeing none, I would accept a motion to adjourn. All in favor?